While others were trying to think through what married life for Harry and Meghan might be like, the couple's sense of frustration and their suspicion of the palace establishment were creating problems of their own. First and foremost came the question of security. After they got engaged in November 2017 and Meghan moved to the UK to join Harry, Kensington Palace had to address Meghan's police protection. When she was with Harry, there was no problem as she fell under his security protection. However, immediately after she arrived in London, there was no mechanism to provide her with permanent police protection. There is a Home Office committee in Britain called the RAVEC, Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, which includes Home Office officials and senior police officers, and which very probably also receives information from the intelligence services. It decides on a case-by-case basis who should receive protection, based on an assessment of the threat faced by the individual. The problem was that Harry doesn't really operate on the same timeline as the committees. They like to make informed judgments based on evidence. He likes instant action. Harry's personal secretary, Ed Lane Fox, had to spend a lot of time talking to other personal secretaries in government agencies about security. One insider says it came at a time when the committee was trying to reduce the level of security provided to members of the royal family. We had to make it clear, privately to Meghan, that a mixed-race woman marrying a member of the royal family would be subject to various security risks and should be protected regardless of any future plans. Ed had to fight a huge battle to make them understand that she could not live her life without police protection. Meghan didn't even know what was going on around her because we didn't want her to have another reason to think she wasn't welcome. She was convinced from the beginning that she was going to be rejected all the time. So we didn't even tell her about it. Ed did amazing things for her behind the scenes, but none of them were appreciated. For Harry and Meghan, the 2 months it took to make the decision seemed endless. It seemed to them that those in power were simply unwilling to provide her with the security she needed. What they didn't want to understand was that it wasn't a simple process. It was taking time. And it was frustrating for them. Meghan's attorneys from Schillings went on to say that she had a clear desire to fit in with the family. She left her country, her career and her life in North America to devote herself entirely to her new role, and she made every effort to fulfill that commitment. Harry's frustration over the security issue came up again after the couple decided to step down as working members of the royal family, and they couldn't understand why they couldn't continue to get the same level of security they had before. After they left, Harry sued the Department of the Interior over the recall of his security. He sought judicial review of RAVEC's decision to remove his taxpayer-funded police guard after he and Meghan left their royal roles. The couple pays for their own security in California, but their private team has no access to British intelligence information or police powers. But there's a fundamental difference between what happened to his security after January 2020, when the couple announced their departure, and the frustration they experienced when they believed everyone was deliberately delaying Meghan's security in the fall of 2017. After Megxit, there was a fundamental disagreement over whether they should get taxpayer-funded security. But in 2017, well-meaning courtiers tried their best to help. And, according to Harry and Meghan, it wasn't enough. It was a pattern they would repeat over and over again. A few months before Harry and Meghan's wedding, Buckingham Palace extended a hand of friendship to Meghan. At the Queen's request, Lord Chamberlain Earl Peel, the highest-ranking figure in the House, went to see the couple to explain to Meghan how the palace works. He recalled, "I actually liked her. She was very straightforward, very, very polite, very understanding, very bright. She wanted to learn. At the Queen's direction, I went and told her about the workings of Buckingham Palace and the system as best I could. And she showed considerable interest, asked some very pertinent questions." One can only guess how Meghan managed to make a favorable impression on this 70-year-old conservative hereditary peer, whose main interests, when he was not looking after the Queen's house, revolved around sports and his estate in Yorkshire. But, on paper at least, they had nothing in common. Such gestures, however well-meaning, didn't solve the underlying problem. The relationship between Meghan and the Kensington Palace staff had begun to deteriorate before she and Harry were even married. In late 2017, after announcing their engagement, a senior aide was careful to discuss with the couple the difficulties caused by their treatment of staff. He hinted that people should be treated well and with some understanding, even if they don't meet Harry and Meghan's standards. Meghan is said to have responded, "It's not my job to babysit people." Meghan didn't deal with the junior staff, people that William and Kate and Harry were quite happy to interact with before Meghan came along. She seemed to want respect, and having to talk to someone just below the hierarchy in a small office, where there wasn't much hierarchy, didn't earn her respect. She took it as an insult, says one source. Organizing any wedding is stressful, of course. And perhaps a royal wedding is more stressful than most others. But Harry and Meghan proved particularly difficult. There were fights over schedules, fights over wedding announcements, fights over the gospel choir. The most famous was the tiara scandal discussed in Chapter 7, when Harry yelled at the Queen's costume designer, Angela Kelly. Around the same time, Meghan particularly harshly reprimanded a young female crew member in the presence of her colleagues. After tearing to shreds the plan she had devised, the woman told Meghan how difficult it would be to implement a new one. "Don't worry," Meghan told her, "if I could have asked anyone else to do it, I would have asked him, not you." Later, Prince William, who had heard of this treatment, came to find the woman. "I hope you're all right," he asked. "You're doing a really good job." She immediately burst into tears. Other staff members were also criticized, both by Harry and by Meghan. Journalist Robert Jobson reported that Harry became irritable and testy with staff during wedding preparations. He wrote, "Sometimes raising his voice, Harry would insist, 'Whatever Meghan wants, she gets.'" Once, when Meghan was feeling anxious about some problem, she called a staff member several times, who was absent for dinner on Friday night. "Every 10 minutes I had to go outside for her and Harry to yell at me. It was like, 'I can't believe you did this, you let me down, what were you thinking?' It went on for a couple of hours." According to the employee, the calls resumed the next morning and continued for several days. You couldn't physically get away from them. There were no lines or boundaries. It was last thing in the evening, first thing in the morning. Not to mention the emails from Meghan at 5 a.m. The relationship between the couple and some of their high-ranking staff became so strained that Miguel Head, William's personal secretary, had to step in to try to keep the peace. While Meghan's royal lesson with Earl Peel probably had some merit, David Manning, Miguel Head and others tried to think creatively about the opportunities that came her way when she joined the royal family. Nothing they could do, however, was ever good enough for her. She was looking for examples of how we were letting her down from the beginning, says one former staffer. "We needed to prove that the institution would do everything it could to make her happy. But that wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to be rejected. Perhaps it's time for a reboot."